welcome to another edition of BestowCast, the audio edition. So we're going to do something a little bit different. So I'm recording this ahead of time. I'm recording this at the point of when I haven't seen Disney Plus's, that's hard to say, that's a mouthful. Let's try again. Disney Plus's She-Hulk. I have not seen it as of yet, and the final episode had just dropped not too terribly long ago. So I wanted to record the first part where I talk about not watching it. All right. Good night, folks. That's the end. I wanted to kind of give some insight. You know, I try to stray away from spoilers, but the internet hates me, and they want to make sure that I have everybody to chime in and just pop those. Disney Plus has to run those ads no matter where I'm at, and they're like, here's some stuff that you missed, and it's like, oh, I wish I wanted to see this, but I want to use this part of this first part of the podcast to talk about outside stimuli towards She-Hulk and my thoughts on the Disney Plus series without seeing the series. And then the second half of this podcast, I will actually talk about, I'll watch all the episodes, and then I will talk about She-Hulk after I've seen it and see how close I am to what I thought the series would be. First of all, I mean, I guess like the major influence or most of the stuff that I've seen about She-Hulk it's a comic book, of course. It's a part of the MCU. I'm surprised. I didn't know that they were going to go down the route, but I've seen that from the trailers that they do go down the route of Jennifer Walters getting a blood transfusion from Bruce Banner. I didn't think that they were in the MCU version. I thought they were going to go a different route with that. But from what I saw in the trailers, it looks like that's the same route that they went down. Some of the stuff that I've seen was that there's a lot of people upset that this isn't really, like, this seems to be out of continuity. This seems to be kind of on its own continuity. Which, if it is, I kind of hope that it is, because we're at, like, what, 10 plus years, 15 years? How long has the MCU been going? And it's getting harder and harder to take in every single film, every single TV show, every single Disney Plus, every single one shot, every single, those DVD bonus extras that are all now considered canon. It's hard to keep up with all that stuff and keep that all organized. As the comic fan in me is like, oh yeah, this is great. But then the reality fan, is that a thing? The reality of it is that this is kind of tough to have to be into everything. Like, at one time the Netflix series was canon, and then I guess it's not canon anymore. And now it went from being canon to not being canon to now being multiverse. So it's sort of canon, but it was a different universe, maybe? With the Netflix stuff, I got out of that stuff. Like, that stuff got hard to watch after a while. And I think, like, I only made it to, like, I think it was their 4th season of Daredevil. I only made it to, like, 3rd season Daredevil. And then I was like, kind of like, all right, I'm out. It got harder because it's like, I get into the 1st season, and when I get into it, it'd be over. And then it's like, oh, the 2nd season's out, but he's like, it's like with She-Hulk here. I'll watch it whenever I get to it. Iron Fist just was bleh. Punisher I was into for like 3 episodes, and then it was just like, Jessica Jones I never even got into. I had no, like, desire for that character. And I bring up this point because it's hard when all this stuff is supposed to be canon. So I need to watch all this stuff to understand how all this stuff intermingles with the other stuff that it has to do with something that might be a stuff that's a stuffy stuffed down the stuffy stuffed at the end of the stuff. If it's canon to like the immediate surroundings, but it's building up to something that's like 10 years down the line and stuff. And it's just like, yeah, I feel like the Netflix stuff just was, like if I were to compare the Netflix stuff to the Disney Plus stuff, the Disney Plus stuff is just like, hey, if we can tell this story in 7 episodes, we're done. Versus the Netflix stuff where it's just like, oh, we've got 22 episodes or whatever it was. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, but it just seems like, they had like, we have the whole television idea of like, oh, there has to be X amount of episodes to be considered a season. And Netflix kind of pulled from that. Whereas Disney's just like, you know what? We're just going to tell Werewolf by Night in 1 episode and call it a day. Book of Boba Fett, we're going to do like 6 episodes and 2 more episodes that aren't even Book of Boba Fett within the same episodes. It seems like that they're kind of reined in, they're kind of kept smaller. And I think like in the long term that kind of, for me, that's a little bit better, where it's like, well, now I'm not committing to 4 seasons at 22 episodes apiece of Daredevil, 2 seasons of Punisher, 22 episodes apiece, Jessica Jones series, 2 or 3 seasons of Luke Cage, a season or 2 of Iron Fist, and then we got the Defenders movie, which all that tied together, and it's just like I didn't even watch the Defenders series. I think I was kind of done by that time. So I went that far off base to pretty much say that if it's true that She-Hulk is out of continuity and it doesn't really tie into anything, she's a part of the MCU, but she's kind of like she's an outlier and stuff like that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with enjoying an episode just to enjoy an episode. I've seen people complain online that it's too comedic and that she just ripped off Deadpool because she breaks the fourth wall and stuff. I didn't read many She-Hulk comic books, but from what I recall of the comic books, she was pretty much like breaking the fourth wall, and it was kind of a little bit campy and stuff in the comics. So I don't think that it's really that far out. I mean, if anything, Deadpool might have like stolen a page out of her book versus the other way. So yeah, there's those kind of ordeals. There's those kind of things. So I'm kind of hoping that it's out of continuity. I'm hoping that there's not really too much tying to the overall MCU. I know it's not true because I already read the spoiler that a character that shows up in She-Hulk is a character that's going to be in the new Captain America movie. So yeah, there's some ties. It is gonna tie over, but I don't know if it's going to be a tight, it's going to be a strict tie-in, or it's just going to be a kind of a loose tie-in. If I'm going to guess how the MCU is, I'm going to go with the tight tie-in versus the loose tie-in. I mean, I want it to be a loose tie-in, but they're trying to sell She-Hulk merchandise. They're trying to sell the next Captain America movie. They're trying to get the next Avengers franchise. So, they're sowing the seeds now. I'm torn with that whole thing. The fanboy in me was like, this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. You wanted the comic books all tied in together. You wanted a film franchise that tied together. And then then it came to the realization of the commitment it takes to watch it all. Another side trek here is that, I don't know the podcast. I would like to name drop the podcast that I got it from, but this was years and years and years and years and years ago, of where they were talking about like the Star Wars franchise. And in that they kind of have to pick and choose, they kind of dropped out because the Star Wars franchise pretty much started going down the same route, where it's like, now for me to enjoy Star Wars, I have to enjoy 9 films, and I have to enjoy 3 spin-off films, and I have to enjoy 15 seasons of Clone Wars and 2 seasons of Bad Batch, and they're all like 22 episodes apiece. This whole thing that I went through with the Netflix series, it applies to Star Wars. But then they're like, the comic books are canon, the novels are canon, like the video games are canon. And like the podcast people were just like, I can't do all this. I can't, I have to pick and choose. I can't imbibe all of this stuff. I can't absorb all of this and then just to enjoy, a film in the future or whatever. And I kind of get that. I get that with Star Wars, but Star Wars kind of happened over decades. It happened over years and years and years. Whereas like this Marvel stuff is just like, as soon as as soon as WandaVision was over, we had Falcon Winter Soldier. As soon as again. This isn't solid evidence. I'm using this as an example, but it's just like as soon as one thing was over on Disney Plus, the next thing was over. Once the next thing was over, the next thing was over. And once the next thing on Disney Plus was over, we had a movie that came out that tied into all that stuff. We had Doctor Strange came out and that tied into WandaVision. And then we have the next thing that comes out. And now we have Thor, and then we have. It all is like on top of each other, and it's all in your face, and it's all like week to week to week to week to week, and it's a lot to take in. And I feel like I'm bitching too much. I didn't really come here to bitch. I kind of came here to compare and contrast to She-Hulk. And I think I'm at the point now that we can finally take a break, and I will probably be away from the microphone for however long it takes me to watch what I think it's like 9 episodes for the season. I'm going to watch the hell out of She-Hulk, and I'm going to go back and listen to this intro and see how close was I to what I thought about She-Hulk. So it'll be a few seconds for you, but it will be a week for me. So I'll catch you on the flip side. Well, welcome back. What was a few minutes for you or a few seconds for you, depending on whether or not there was an ad played during the break, was like probably a week, maybe 6 days, maybe 5 days. I don't remember when the last time I recorded the first part, but I binged She-Hulk, the Disney Plus series, and I don't know where should I begin with this. Let's see here. I mean, a lot of going into this, a lot of it was, this is nothing but a Deadpool ripoff. Disney's just unoriginal, and they're just doing up the Deadpool, just She-Hulk style. So I was kind of going in there expecting, I don't know, Deadpool, I guess. I never owned a She-Hulk comic. I think the only times I ever really owned anything that had She-Hulk in it was when she was a part of the Fantastic Four team, and that was kind of just sporadic. I never really had an ongoing run of Fantastic Four. It was like whenever it would pique my interest, or had or when the 90s rolled around and were like, here's an interesting cover, you need to own this, and the reprint of it, which also has an interesting cover, and the reprint of the reprint of the reprint, which also has an interesting cover, and the sparkly cover. But I do know going into the Disney Plus series that She-Hulk had a tendency to break the fourth wall, and that she was it wasn't really necessarily a super serious comic, but that she kind of got there before Deadpool got there. It's not a new concept. Ferris Bueller does that. So I guess based off the internets, I was going in there expecting a Deadpool-esque kind of thing, and maybe off the heels of Thor: Love and Thunder, maybe something that was a little bit on the Looney Tunes side. But really, it really wasn't all. It wasn't that. I mean, it's a comedy series. It's a law comedy series. She talks to you, the audience. She does break the fourth wall. You get to the I guess spoiler warnings, but I guess you should know that by now. But when we get to the final episode, she way breaks the fourth wall. But I don't really think it's on par with Deadpool or anything. And it's kind of funny is the thing with the internet, the thing with the people, poo-pooing on it, or they every week they found something wrong with it. Oh, Tatiana, forgive me if that's wrong. people were upset with the portrayal of that character, or the fact that She-Hulk twerks in a post-credit scene and stuff like that. But the overall arc or the overall story was kind of feeding off of that kind of negative, toxic fan base. Where there's a scene in there where Hulk is always a man. It's always Bruce Banner. It's always a guy. Well, she doesn't deserve the title, So it was just a personification of like the internet's or negativity or the negative fan base or anything else, which I found amusing. Was it like Deadpool levels of crazy? Was it like Looney Tunes as far as like Thor: Love and Thunder? No, not at all. It was very kind of grounded. A lot of people make the Ally McBeal comparison. I've never watched Ally McBeal, so I can't really say it was like that. But it was a courtroom procedural with kind of just a comedy slant. People were upset about Titania, which I can understand. She didn't really shine all that well in this series, but maybe this isn't the series for her. This is just her origin and how she's going to interact in the future. So hopefully they'll give her a little bit more comic tie-in. I'm more upset that they did the Wrecking Crew dirty. I kind of wanted a little bit more out of that, but I mean, I guess you should be happy that we got the Wrecking Crew to begin with. However low level or however kind of meh they kind of made them. This isn't that show for that. Maybe if they fear somewhere else, they'll be a little bit more on par. Another bit that I kind of hear from, or one of my friends always harkens, is because this is a comedy, it's out of continuity. And I saw like a lot of posts during the time of this that it was like, all this stuff kind of happens outside of continuity. There's no way that if this is comedy that this has to be in par with the rest of the MCU. And I don't agree with that. I feel like a lot of this still ends up on par with the rest of what MCU is doing. I think she fits. I think whatever happens in her show can happen, happens elsewhere. It's not like, I know the comparison I wanted to make this was that, when people were saying this was like Deadpool, I was expecting, going into seeing She-Hulk and seeing the Tick. Because a lot of people were saying, we got Porcupine Man, and we got the Bull Man, and we got the Matador who's not a Matador, and we have all these like low Z grade heroes that are from the books, they are from the comics. The show doesn't do anything above and beyond like Wong or Hulk or Emil Blonsky or anything. It just kind of treats the show kind of treats it like the Tick, and I don't feel like it was the Tick either. This is way not the Tick. So I guess before I get into like the rest of the series, let's just jump right to the ending, because I only have a half an episode to talk overview of it, so I can't really talk of each episode in detail. But we'll skip to the end, which I'm kind of a mixed feelings of how it ends. Like they were building up this whole thing of how to destroy She-Hulk and Intelligentsia, and possibly is the leader coming back from the movie. They brought Emil Blonsky, the Abomination, back from the original Hulk film. But maybe the leader was coming back because Intelligentsia is a part of the leader's organization, and the leader is supposed to be in the new Captain America movie. So maybe this is a tie-in to that. And they kind of built, like, there's all this like kind of subplot of like them trying to steal Jen Walters' blood and everything else. And they kind of get to this thing, and it gets all like really, really bit bonkers, where like Emil he does transform, even though she got him out on parole. He does transform into the Abomination, even though the agreement was that he shouldn't or he can't. The guy injects himself with the Hulk King injects himself with Jen Walters' blood, and he becomes another Hulk. And Bruce Banner comes from out of nowhere, and all of a sudden sees the Abomination there, and they break into a fight. And she's like, she stops down the show. She stops down the show, and we go to the Disney Plus menu. and she pops out of the She-Hulk little icon and crawls down to the Marvel. I think it's like I forget what it's called, but it's actually on Disney Plus. It's the behind the scenes kind of stuff that where they put all the behind the scenes making of kind of things in there. And she goes in there and she breaks the fourth wall and she busts into her own show, and she breaks into the writer's room and demands, is like, this is my show. You're kind of like overshadowing, you're bringing all these other things that are not about me and overshadowing me with things that are like better or whatever, that she's not really, she's not able to star in her own show. Everything hinges on everything else, and the whole blood thing, the whole the stealing of the blood is just reminiscent of the superhero soldier serum, which is just an unoriginal concept in a Hulk franchise. And eventually they tell her that she has to bring it up, or she decides to bring it up with Kevin Feige. Or Feig, however it's pronounced. We'll just go with Kevin because that's the twist. And she finds Kevin, and Kevin, or shall I say Kevin, is actually a robot, an algorithm built to just make these shows and just churn them out at the best that they can. I don't know. Is that a nod to YouTube, that the only way you get noticed is if you abide by the algorithm and you don't break those rules. So ultimately she's like, she tells Kevin that she needs to, that she needs to be the star of her own show, and she demands, no Bruce, no Emil Blonsky. He admits to his wrong and goes back to jail. No Hulk King injecting his thing, and she becomes the star of her story. And when we resume the film again, Hulk King goes to jail, Emil Blonsky goes to jail, Daredevil, which I didn't even touch on, just appears out of nowhere, and she overcomes her adversary off screen, I guess. It's all implied because she talked to Kevin about this, and this is she got the ending that she wanted. And it's kind of lackluster. It was kind of like cliffhanger. It was the cliffhanger just really wasn't wasn't on top. Wasn't like what you would expect it to be out of the show. You kind of think that it kind of just undoes like the entire season. Like what they did there just undoes like everything that you watched for those 9 episodes just kind of got undone by just random fourth wall break. But having some time, I watched this a couple days ago, so I had some time to kind of think and reflect. I had some friends to kind of bounce the ideas off of. And honestly, well, my visceral reaction was, well, this sucks. Kind of thinking it over, it's like, well, it is her show. Like, the show wasn't about them trying to kill her and stuff. That was the B plot. But the show was about her coming into her own, being She-Hulk and claiming She-Hulk as her own thing. And I think that ending actually kind of gave her that. It wasn't really, it's not a Falcon and Winter Soldier story. It's not a WandaVision story. It's her story, and her story revolves off of revolves off of being Bruce Banner's cousin. And she's a female, and she's a superhero, and she's and it's basically like breaking all those kind of conventions. And just her being herself, or her like kind of becoming She-Hulk in terms that she wants to be She-Hulk, because Bruce Banner wants her to be a hero, and she wants to be a lawyer. She takes claim to that. She doesn't even really want to be She-Hulk at all, but she ends up having to become She-Hulk. Overall, I guess like my review, it's kind of unique. I don't think it falls out of continuity like a lot of people want to say. I feel like even though it's comedy, I feel like it's still in continuity. So I think some stuff happens, even though like the ending, like she undoes the ending by the fourth wall break, but I don't think she undoes what happens throughout the series. Like she's just like, oh, well, the Hulk King just doesn't inject himself with the blood. It doesn't mean that her blood was still stolen. It does, all those events still happen, which still kind of leads those seeds to a sequel or a spinoff or anything else. So I don't think that they undid anything in that series with that finale. So it's just I don't know. If I were to compare it with the last Disney Plus Marvel property that came out, which was Miss Marvel, I like the show a lot better than Miss Marvel. Excuse me. Maybe I'll come back and do a Miss Marvel review later on down the road. I've kind of noticed with like the Disney Plus series in a whole, because this includes like the Star Wars stuff, where it's just kind of like they kind of have me hooked for like the first couple of episodes. And then a couple episodes in between where it's just like, oh, I kind of don't care anymore. Like can we get to the end? Can we get to the end of this? And I know I complained about where it's like, oh, when it's 22 episodes long, I have a tendency to get lost. When we do these in 9 episodes, it's much better. It is much better, but I still have a tendency to get lost. So like in comparison to say like, Miss Marvel, where it's like I was in for like the first episode, maybe up to episode 3. And then afterwards it was just like, all right, can we get this over with? I'm kind of done here. Same with Obi-Wan, where it's like, I was in for the first couple episodes, and then the longer the episodes ran, it's just like, I don't really care about these characters anymore. I just kind of want this to be over, move on. Book of Boba Fett, so on. This one, I think I was pretty much in from the beginning to end. Some stuff was kind of lackluster. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess has some room to improve come season 2. I don't know. I think that it did its own thing, and I think that a lot of people wanted to compare it to the MCU formula, that it has to be the MCU cookie cutter, and this kind of isn't the MCU cookie cutter, and I kind of like it for not being the MCU cookie cutter and being slightly different. So I think I kind of liked it a little bit better. Ranking it against all the other Disney Plus stuff, we'll have to come back and maybe I'll have to do the ranking Disney Plus in an episode. We'll actually do a rank. Maybe I'll bring Riley in. But I think this might be pretty much top tier in comparison. I mean, it's pretty tough call, because I really liked WandaVision. I really liked Moon Knight. That was another thing that was kind of like hooked into like every episode. So it's like, I think it's like between those 3. I might be forgetting something, but just kind of shooting off the cuff is between those 3. I think it's kind of like one of the top tier things. As far as it being a comedy and not ranking, I don't see that at all. I don't, it's just a framing device. Thor: Love and Thunder was goofy, but it still happens in continuity. Some of the goofy stuff may or may not be canon, but I don't see why it wouldn't be a part of the continuity. If you'd like me to go a little bit more in detail, or maybe do like an episode to episode comparison, I would consider doing that on the podcast or whatever. But I'd have to know if you, the listeners, or if you're watching this on YouTubes, reach out and let me know if you want me to do a sub-series. I may not want to push the regular series off course by doing 9 episodes of my own podcast for each episode of She-Hulk, but maybe I'll do a sub-series. But you gotta let me know. You gotta like, and you gotta subscribe, and you gotta comment, and you gotta eat those Cheetos, and you gotta dance naked in the full moon, and you gotta come back next time when we do another episode of Bestow.